Hello guys, I hope you're doing well. Today I want to discuss and address the latest report of OPCW regarding the Douma, the alleged chemical attack in Douma. On the 6th of July 2018, the OPCW issued a statement and it included a lot of details thanks to their investigation, underground investigation in Douma. They came to Syria after the invitation of the Syrian government. Today I want to address this issue with the Syrian Girl. She is a prominent Syrian activist and commentator, and also she is an expert in chemistry. So she will add value to our discussion and try to shed light on the difference between the chlorine and the chlorine gas and other sarin gas. I don't know, I'm an ignorant in this regard, but Mimi is the one who will tell us about all these details. Hello, Mimi. Hello, Syrian Girl, and thank you very much for accepting my invitation.
I'm glad to finally be on this channel. It's always been a dream of mine.
We were planning for a long time for such an interview with you, and because she's in Australia and I'm in Germany and the time difference is very big between us, but now I'm free and she's free and we are doing it on Syriana analysis. Actually, the OPCW issued the statement. I believe it's important because this time the OPCW experts were underground in Syria and not from neighboring countries, as it was the case in Khan Sheikhun. And starting from the second article of the summary of their findings, the OPCW says that they were not able to go to Douma for almost a week for their arrival, after their arrival to Syria, because of high security risks to their team. This was an evaluation of the OPCW and not by the Syrian government or the Russian government, as the Western mainstream media was claiming. Mimi, do you remember that at that time the governments in the West and the media, the MSM, were saying that the Russians and the Syrians are banning the OPCW to go there? But from the report, it's obvious that it's the security team of the OPCW which says and evaluated that it's not possible to go there in the first week.
Absolutely. You know, this is point 2.2 in the OPCW report that said that they had a risk due to sleeper cells that might still be operating inside Douma and unexploded grenades and ordnances that didn't allow them to go into the area. And it took approximately a week to do that. But of course, at the time, the reports that were coming out in the media was that the Syrian government has something to hide, and so does the Russian government, and hence they are blocking the OPCW from reaching the chemical weapons site, etc., etc. And of course, we knew that wasn't true at the time. We said that wasn't true at the time, and this report exposes that. But the media is not going to retract any of the statements that they made.
But at that time, Mimi, you, myself, and myself, we were accused of being a conspiracy theorists for saying that. And now it appears 100% that these people who claim to be part of the mainstream media with billions of dollars in their budgets, that they are the conspiracy theorists and not we are the conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, it's never a theory when they're talking about conspiracies, is it? It's always the claim that their words are official, and as we know, they are the biggest liars that are out there, basically.
So as you said, Mimi, they are lying not only about the OPCW, but since the beginning of the war in Syria. Now, if we go to 2.5, the point 2.5, they say the results of the analysis of the prioritized samples submitted to OPCW designated laboratories were received by the OPCW team on the 22nd of May 2018. Now, this is the important thing. They say no organophosphorus nerve agents or their degradation products were detected, either in the environmental samples or in plasma samples from the alleged casualties. So here, people are asking, what's the organophosphorus nerve agent in when it comes to chemical weapons? Mimi, if you can elaborate a little bit this.
Basically, it means sarin or sarin derivatives. If you looked at the chemical formula for sarin, it has a phosphorus atom in it, and it's also an organic substance. So this is where the term comes from.
So this is the gas that they claimed to be used to have been used in Khan Sheikhoun last year in their report. But the difference was that the OPCW team, they didn't go to Khan Sheikhoun at that time, and they collected their samples from the activists underground and from the white helmets who are basically Al-Nusra Front humanitarian wing. So they violated their own charter. And some people always, when we talk about these things, for example, on Twitter, they put this link of the OPCW and say, look, the OPCW claimed that it was a bombing from the Syrian government in Khan Sheikhoun, but the fact is they violated their own charter, and they violated their own how the organization works for their investigation, and they collected their samples from a third party. So it is a null and void, that that report, and they need to go to that particular place. But actually, Al-Nusra already destroyed the entire area of that chemical weapon, so nothing could be found again in that particular place.
And even if you read this report, in point 2.4, they said that, you know, in this case, that they followed the organization's chain of custody procedures. Whereas in Khan Sheikhoun, of course, they didn't follow a chain of custody because they had the white helmets collect up supposed samples, which could have obviously been either tampered with or contaminated. Nevertheless, you know, even if they did discover sarin in those samples, it doesn't discount the fact that the rebels are fully capable of using sarin in Khan Sheikhoun as well. But the evidence around the area, like of, you know, what could have caused the gas, or if there was gas, none of that was collected by the OPCW in Khan Sheikhoun. That was a white helmets thing. In this case, it's completely the opposite. You know, they had the ability to collect their own samples. And it's interesting that they can have the ability to collect their own samples when the Syrian government controls the area. But if the rebels control the area, they don't allow the OPCW a safe passageway to go in there and collect their own samples.
Last time, I have 2 points to mention here, Mimi. One, the OPCW last time said that they cannot go there because it's dangerous. That means that they cannot trust the people underground to go there. But at the same time, they collected the samples from the same people who they are afraid from. Two, that the OPCW took the samples from people who, I watched the videos when they are collecting the samples. They are with bare hands. Some people are walking with without even boots on their feet. They're walking around as if there is a festival. You know, how can somebody walk around if there is a sarin gas?
You know, the funniest video was they were collecting samples of some kind of liquid on the ground, and one of the men was wearing sandals, and one of the other men who was wearing a full like PPE protective headdress told him, no, don't step there, that's sarin. As if like you could step on liquid sarin that's still liquid on the ground, and you in the sandals and you'd live. So
I watched the same video. I watched the same video. There was a guy on a motor. He was moving around, and then he stopped. What's happening here, guys? Oh, sarin gas. Oh, sarin gas. Okay.
Oh, no.
He just
You know, the Human Rights Watch said that there was liquid sarin on the asphalt, which is completely chemically ridiculous, you know, because sarin evaporates very quickly, and even if that was liquid sarin, then everyone in that vicinity would be dead. But, you know, that just goes to show you the credibility of Human Rights Watch.
Don't let me start with the Human Rights Watch, my friend, because we need tens of episodes to talk about their bias, unfortunately. But in the same 2.5 point, in addition to the nerve gas, they mentioned that various chlorinated organic chemicals were found in samples from locations 2 and 4 along with residues of explosive. These results are reported in Annex 3 work. I will put all the entire report in the description below so that our friends can check the entire thing. But what's the difference between a chlorine gas and the chlorinated materials for somebody like me who doesn't have a clue about it?
Okay, so we all know that chlorine is an element, but in nature it can exist in various forms. It can exist in an elemental gas form, like Cl2, where you have two chlorine atoms. And this is a very small molecule that basically in room temperature is a gas. This is what we mean by chlorine gas. It's Cl2. However, you can get that same chlorine element and it can be combined into a compound of other elements, like hydrocarbons, which hydrocarbons are anything that have carbon chains and hydrogens in it. So if you have a chlorine atom inside one of these molecules, then you have a chlorinated hydrocarbon. And this can be anything very safe, very simple, very organic. It exists in nature. It could mean anything, like polymers, etc. It basically could be completely meaningless. On the other hand, it could mean that there was something like phosphogene, which is a chlorinated hydrocarbon gas that does kill people. So, but they haven't really specified what they mean by these molecules. It could be something that is completely innocuous that's found in nature, or it could be something like a gas that could kill people. So they didn't specify that really.
But if we know the geography of the area, Mimi, this is an agricultural area. Whether it's Douma and Eastern Ghouta are more or less an agricultural farms. So could it be possible that chlorine materials could be used in water to clean the water of the agriculture? For giving water for this agriculture. I mean,
definitely. There's even chlorine in the water here where I live in Australia. So it would make perfect sense. I mean, there's chlorine in our soil, Chlorine is in salt, sodium chloride, of course, but that is not an that's not a hydrocarbon because there's no carbon in that. But, there's chlorine in a lot of things, including hydrocarbons all over our soil, in water. It's not a huge thing, but it's more important to know specifically what molecules or chemicals they're talking about when they say that, because it could be completely meaningless or it could be something meaningful, but they haven't really told us that.
The investigation is still going on, actually, and there will be another final report about the alleged chemical attack in Douma, which resulted in an attack against Syria and illegal airstrikes against Syria by the French, by the British, and by the Americans, accusing the Syrian government of using chemical weapons. But until this moment, the OPCW says that there was no nerve agent or sarin gas, but chlorinated materials that Mimi already explained to us. So let's move to the point 2.6. The OPCW team visited locations 2 and 4 where it observed the presence of an industrial gas cylinder on a top floor patio at location 2 and the presence of a similar cylinder lying on the bed of a top floor apartment in location 4. Close to the location of each cylinder, there were crater-like openings in the respective reinforced concrete roofs. Work is ongoing to assess association of the cylinders with the incident, the relative damage to the cylinders on and the roofs, and how the cylinders arrived at their respective locations. So could it be that this chlorine came from these cylinders, or these cylinders were just the bombs in this area?
Well, I don't see how the cylinders could be a bomb, because the cylinder is actually a gas cylinder and it could very well contain chlorine gas. You wouldn't use a cylinder as a bomb. Usually a bomb would have actual fins attached to it, or maybe, some
Warhead.
kind of, a warhead, exactly. Not a gas cylinder. And the fact that these gas cylinders were not, if they were dropped from a height, they would break. They would, but they were completely as they were, perfect condition, and one of them was lying on a bed. And if you look down inside not the official report, but lower down in the PDF. Sorry, if I correct myself, not in the summary at the top, but lower down in the report, they talk about the degrees of the location of the craters versus the location of the cylinder, and how nothing around the cylinder was damaged around
but it wasn't
bed
exploded.
and furniture. Yeah, so the OPCW actually noted that, and they said that we still haven't explained how this cylinder got there and what it contained. So it's quite possible that they got chlorine gas cylinders and laid them on the bed. Perhaps they were related to the suffocation of the civilians that were under the ground. That's a possibility. If chlorine in an open space might not be so dangerous, but in a closed space, it can suffocate people.
And it could be also manipulated, because one of the, for example, investigations by Eva Bartlett, she showed, for example, the original photo of victims in this location, and then another manipulated picture where the white helmets, they put a body of a baby over other bodies in order to give an other kind of impressions to that bombing. So these cylinders could be manipulated and been put in that location. But also, since these cylinders were not exploded, we don't know whether or not these cylinders were containing gas, chlorine, or nothing at all, because this kind of cylinders also been used by the so-called rebels in Aleppo on daily basis. We remember they called it the Madfa' Jahannam, or the hell cannon. And with these cylinders, they killed more than 13,000 civilians in Aleppo. So we don't know yet to whom belonged this cylinder. In my understanding of the war in Syria, and I'm following it for 7 years, I didn't see the Syrian government using gas cylinders against any particular area. It was all of these weapons were used by the rebels themselves. So let's see what the OPCW will say in this regard. But if we move, Mimi, to the point 2.7.
If I just make one last point about the cylinder, during 2013 and 2014, when they were removing Syria's chemical weapons program, there was a lot of talk about how Syria was using a sophisticated missile system as a binary weapon with two different types of chemicals that would later combine to form sarin, and these were the precursors. And so they went from those kind of weapons to the idea of a gas cylinder. The change of the required evidence has gone from that to that, and it's just interesting that they don't even need to try anymore in regard to these false flags.
Yes,
but
exactly.
Please continue.
Unfortunately, a lot of details that we missed, and sometimes we don't understand because we are not experts in this regard. So it's very easy to manipulate the public opinion if they don't read and understand every single word of these reports. And that's how the Western governments can exploit this kind of incidents in order to continue their regime change project in Syria. But in point 2.7, the OPCW says, based on the equipment and chemicals observed during the two on-site visits to the warehouse and the facility suspected by the authorities of the Syrian Arab Republic of producing chemical weapons, there was no indication of either facility being involved in the production of chemical warfare agents.
Well, it's interesting that they should say that, but when we looked at those sites, there was obviously boxes and boxes of chlorine in different forms, including in organo, in hydrocarbon chlorinated forms. So I would say that, number one, if they weren't producing chemical weapons or anything toxic, what were the rebel chemical plants used for? If they were, obviously they were used for something related to war, because that was the purpose of the rebels. So if it wasn't something like sarin what were they actually producing. And it's interesting that there was chlorine chemicals inside that lab, and there was chlorine chemicals found on the site. Surely there should be a link, or a possible link, but they didn't really mention that. And it's important to note that the OPCW, a lot of people who have quit the OPCW have said that it's not the organization that it used to be, and there are a lot of influences and pressure on it to say different things. Obviously there was a lot of pressure on it to accept the lack of chain of custody accountability in Khan Sheikhoun. So we must take a lot of what they say with a grain of salt, but it's not really answered the question. If they weren't producing chemical weapons in those labs, what were the rebels using the chemicals for?
Actually, Mimi, last time in Khan Sheikhoun, the report was even leaked to certain journalists 1 week before its issuing in or publication on their official website. And some of these anti-Syria activists on Twitter, they had the copy of this report, and they posted it, some of the outcomes of that report on Twitter, and then they removed it from Twitter because it totally goes against the secrecy of the investigation and also the mechanism of the investigation, that we also knew that the OPCW refused to go to that location, as I mentioned, for two reasons. One is a dangerous place, but at the same time they got the materials from these dangerous people, and the two is that they said they lack budget, $500. This was something that been revealed by the permanent representative of the Syrian Arab Republic in the UN, Dr. Bashar Jafari, who said that the OPCW representatives told him that they lack a budget of $500 to go to Syria. This is very funny for an organization to claim that they lack money or budget to go and investigate such a important event, which led to the bombing of Shairat Air Base, also in Syria.
Yeah, so I suppose they're requesting some more money, I suppose, but from who exactly?
The Syrian government told them, we can give you the $500. Please come to Khan Sheikhoun, and they refused to come to Khan Sheikhoun again at that time.
Well, it just goes to show. Also, I think around that time, the head of the OPCW, as far as I understand, is of Turkish origin, and a lot of the samples went to Turkey. And we all know Turkey is not a unbiased party when it comes to Syria.
And even here, Mimi, even in this report, they say that they interviewed witnesses in country X, and we all know that country X is Turkey.
Of course, if not Turkey, then Jordan, which is equally unbiased, but more likely Turkey.
It's Turkey. I will tell you why it's Turkey, because the people who were evacuated from Douma, and they didn't want to stay in Douma, they have been transferred to Idlib, and Idlib is on the borders with Turkey. So and you remember the CNN reporter or the journalist Arwa Damon, she was sniffing the backpack of the baby, and absolutely, there is something here.
We should bring her nose to Syria since she can detect everything.
A new investigation tool to decide whether or not the chemical weapons were used. Just a sniff.
OPCW they should hire her.
Imagine that if I know, if I have a doubt that 1% or 0.5% that there is a chlorine gas or sarin gas traces on that backpack, I wouldn't dare to come 5 kilometers from that backpack. She was sniffing it.
Yeah, absolutely. If she thought she was in danger, the first rule is you don't smell it. But at the end of the day, no matter what the chemical was, anyone can make these chemicals. I mean, it's not beyond the realm of imagination that even if the rebels themselves aren't producing sarin, that a foreign country would be able to provide them sarin, since foreign countries have been arming them quite a lot. And also, it's interesting that the idea that the white helmets said that the attack in Douma had sarin in it, and they were absolutely lying, as it turns out from this report. So, but once again, nobody's going to question their credibility. No one's going
Of course,
to go back to those statements that were happening at a time when they were trying to get the US or NATO to attack Syria.
I just want to mention last thing, Mimi, that Simon Hirsch, the renowned investigative journalist, he in his last interview, he mentioned different codes for sarin and chlorine gas, and the entire international community, because they destroyed the chemical weapons of Syria, they know these codes, and if they compare these codes with the kind of chemicals being used in Syria, whether it's chlorine or it's sarin, they will know who used this kind of weaponry, because the Syrian government handed over all its chemical weapons, and their weapons been destroyed by the OPCW and in collaboration between Russia and the United States on a warship, on an American warship. And the John Kerry in 2013, he confessed, and he also tweeted that the chemical weapons of Syria had been destroyed. So who is using the chemical weapons and who is benefiting from these alleged chemical weapons? People can understand after every so-called alleged chemical attacks in Syria that the Western governments are coming and bombing the Syrian government and not bombing the Syrian rebels. So if you think that Assad is stupid to use a chemical weapons to kill 40 people, where the fact is he can use one Grad missile to kill hundreds of militants. I mean, what should I say to this kind of people who believe that Assad is just gassing babies? Every time we see a footage of alleged chemical attack, we see babies laying on the ground. Why these gases are not killing matures or killing militants? Unbelievable.
Only women and children.
Only women and children, just to manipulate your emotion. I'm talking to my friends and those who are watching us. This kind of scenes are manufactured to manipulate your emotions so that you accept whatever your government is doing in Syria, which is a regime change project which failed. And the Syrians are winning, and they will overcome this war, and they will come out from this war victorious. This was one of the most complicated intelligence-related regime change project in Syria. Now it's vanishing thanks to the Syrian army, thanks to the allies, and thanks to the Syrian people who understood that what's going on here is not about democracy and human rights, and any person with a little sanity will understand that it's not the Syrian government using the chemical weapons. If let's suppose it used it one time and saw the consequences, the repercussions, they won't use it again and again and again in order to trigger a foreign intervention. Mimi, thank you very much for your contribution on Syriana analysis. Actually, your input was very valuable for a person like me who is ignorant in chemistry, and also for the people who are watching this episode, in order to understand the difference between the chlorine, between the sarin, the chlorinated materials that I needed to read pages and pages to understand, but you simplify it for us.
No problem. I hope I helped. There was a bit of a distraction. My cat is actually rustling around in the room. So I hope I was still clear. And thank you so much for having me.
Next time I will host you.
Next time you come to my channel.
Next time I will host you and your cat together in the episode, and it would be my pleasure also to be your guest. Thank you very much for your time, Mimi.
No problem.
My friends, this was Syrian Girl from Australia. She elaborated to us the latest OPCW report in regards to the alleged chemical attack in Douma. And I will host more guests soon to shed light on further details of what's going on in Syria. Thank you very much for watching. This is Kevork Almasyan, and you are watching Syriana Analysis.